So in a game like Kinfolk, when people roll dice, do you want it to be making the outcome more certain or less certain? And how much of the way along to resolving things does a given roll get us? Is it because its effect is incremental, or is it because it handles a particular piece of the situation? And finally, hardly finally, shall I say, additionally and consequentially, what does talking have to do with the role as a conducted physical procedure? If I describe what I'm doing and I'm pumped, and somebody at the table has, if you will, the right to say, oh, take a bonus. You got me excited the way you said that. Take a bonus.
Right.
Do you see how talking affected the role?
Yeah.
How about if I'm clever and aggressive as a speaker, and I shout out in time in the course of our murky play, I shout out in time that I have jumped to the top of the boulder to take my shots.
Yeah.
When it comes time for me to roll, I'm like, okay, I've got my height advantage. You see, it says I got a height advantage on my sheet. You know, or on the table in the book says if you have a height advantage, I get a +2.
Right.
I'm going to roll with my +2 now. Because I shouted it out in time.
Right.
How about when I remind people of bonuses and penalties or alterations to the dice that should, I suppose, objectively be applied, but they're easy to forget. But I'm that guy at the table, and I make sure, especially when it's to my benefit, that we remember those.
Right.
Those are 3 different ways of the talking affecting what we do with the physical objects.
Right.
And oddly enough, even in games where people will swear up and down that they are, quote, objective in their use of the dice, you'll see those behaviors all over the place. Some of them aren't even really bad behaviors, I would say. In fact, I would say there are ways to play, and given all the other rules of the game, in which all 3 of those are actually perfectly reasonable pieces of the system. As long as they are aiding against the merc instead of contributing to the merc, then we're good. It depends on what the other pieces of the procedure are. But I'm really getting across the point that the notion that rolling the dice is somehow opposed to or independent of what is said is I don't observe that.
Yeah.
And if I do, I really, I mean, do people just shut off and just roll as, you know, the same way? Yeah, I guess they do sometimes, but you know what? I see some pretty damn bored faces and a whole lot of texting going on when that happens.
Right.
So if we're talking about enjoyable play, the way we talk does affect the way we roll. It does so in acceptable and fun ways, given the rest of the working parts of the system. So far so good?
Yeah.
Right. Now, I trust that we don't really have to go over the probabilistic aspects of this. It's not very hard to understand the difference between a bell or a curve, like a Poisson distribution or any kind of curve, versus a flat line.
Yeah.
That's not very hard to understand. If it's a flat line, then typically what we're saying is that an additional increment is the same increment of probability all the way along the range from 0 to 100. Whereas if we're talking about anything else, the degree of what a +1 means differs depending on where you are on the line. In terms of raw probability of the chance to succeed in a given roll, it actually doesn't make any difference. 75% chance according to this bell, 75% chance according to this flat is still just 75%. What's different is the way that the pluses and the minuses are assigned either in the moment or as character development. Then the difference in curved versus flat systems is profound. Does that make sense?
Could you reiterate that? Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to say that taken without any modifications, my chance to hit is 75%.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this system over here, it's because I roll a 6 or higher on D20.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a flat distribution.
Right.
Under those circumstances, I've got my 75% chance to hit, no problem.
Right.
But if I get a +1, it moves me up by 5%. Now, what if I had a 25% chance to hit, and I get a +1, it'll move me up 5% to hit.
Right.
That's what a flat curve means. The +1 is the same wherever you are.
Yeah.
Now, over here in my 3d6 roll or less, target number or less in champions, and I've got a 10 or less, getting a +2 bumps me over the top of the bell to 13 or less.
Right.
Probabilistically, I just... big difference. And let's say I'm in a really tough situation. I've got like a 7 or less.
Mm-hmm.
9 or less is no fun, but it's a whole lot better. And I mean a lot better. You went way up the slope.
Yeah.
So you see the +1 or +2 in that system differs in its meaning depending on where you are.
Right. Wasn't Fudge System kind of trying to find a marriage between the two of like +1s are the same, but you have a curve?
Well, yes, in terms of that's just a matter of dice reading, though.
Hmm.
Fudge is a profoundly bell curve system.
Yeah.
Because it's a very, very tall, very robust bell, that means that you're not going to get like your -4 or your +4 very often at all.
Yeah.
And if you're at either end of the system, of the scale, it's not going to walk you all the way down. You're only going to get halfway down, even with a maximal result. So that's kind of what I'm after there. In terms of reading the dice, yes, but I'm not really talking about the reading. I'm talking more about the literal probabilistic change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm saying that the difference between a flat distribution and a bell distribution is not so much about the moment of success. It's about how we're going to process pluses and minuses, modifications to it in the moment, and also if we're going to presume that improving your chance is part of the change system for the character, the development system, then clearly changing at champions, changing after 13 or less really isn't that big a deal. You get 14 or less and you're into the high 80%.
Right.
You don't really need to suffer, to spend valuable advancement points on 15 or less as opposed to 14 or less.
Right.
So far, so good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's a little bit about the experiential side of it, and processing these things as numbers. We also have to talk, we can go back to handling time and say, what do we do with a number? Do we have to subtract it from a different number? Do we have to look it up on something? What do we do with it?
Right.
Those are a thing. Do we have to read the dice twice, like damage dice and champions, and then apply those two different numbers to two different responsive values? All kinds of things like that. What about other things that are consequential? We roll and we say, this is how much I hit you for. Oh, and by the way, since I rolled that much, that means I get that many experience points. So there's other things that the dice could be telling us as well that may not actually be fictionally linked to what we just resolved.
Right.
All of those are a thing. In Tunnels and Trolls, when you roll a saving throw, which is kind of a characteristic roll in that game, a resolving roll in many cases, you take the result, whatever you rolled, multiply it by your own level, or is it? No, roll by the level of the roll. Getting into the system here for a second. The point is that regardless of whether you succeed or fail, you're still going to get that many experience points. That's what I'm driving at.
Would you say that the flat line or flat rolls are also tend to be more bouncy, right? They tend to have a wider range of possible outcomes.
Well, that's the thing. I tried to talk about that once, and I twisted myself up so bad and ended up saying exactly the wrong thing, and I don't want to do that again.
Okay.
That's why I kept emphasizing that when you look at the raw percent chance of success or failure, it doesn't matter whether it's a curved or a flat. The percent is the percent.
Okay.
What I do want to say about that, though, is that since those modifiers and the way we talk matter far more than I think we realize, people think of the curved distribution as being more responsive to circumstances, more what's the word I want? Friendly distribution to interact with. Because at certain points on there, when you see a modifier occur, you really feel it. The percent jumped. And you feel good about getting that modifier. If the modifier is the same no matter where you are, you're like, why should I bother trying to get the modifier? I've only got a 30% chance anyway, and he's got a 60% chance.
It's kind of interesting because it feels like a lot of bell curve stuff, at least from my personal point of view, was to try to strive for that accurate portraiture that you're choosing.
Yes, well, in the case of the fudge fate axis of design, absolutely.
Yeah, but then when you take the modifiers, modifiers for people who are, or for characters that are lower, have a lower probabilistic chance.
Right.
It actually it blunts that change so much that it's almost conflicted.
Right. It's a little interesting to relate to the nature of the bell. This is a preference issue I'm about to bring up. If we are idealizing the predictability of the bell to hit the middle a lot, so that it has a high, or the mode, the most commonly observed value is also the median, the middle of the range.
Right.
If that's the case, if we're idealizing that, then fudge is perhaps the acme of that design. If, on the other hand, we are looking for a circumstance that is more wiggly in terms of its outcome, but still has, for lack of a better word, kind of a nice feel that your value actually has an identity. But the 3-die-6, and we're talking right now, just to be crude, a target number or less. I mean, we could say a target number or higher. I know it's the same thing, but let's just, for crude historical reasons, use target number or less. 2d10 and 3d6, experientially for me, have a very satisfying feel in that two characters with different scores, I can see the difference in their performance, but I'm also kind of smirking because I know that wicked chance is going to take the superior by the ankles once in a while.
Right.
You know, I'll go in there swinging with a lower score with that going on, not because the roll is haphazard, but because I know there's enough there to hope for.
Right.
Those two. There's no surprise that the 3D6, which was originally seen, I think, in Steve Jackson's Melee and Wizard, was adopted into Champions and became a staple for many games from that point forward. And that the various pool systems, Shadowrun and then the White Wolf games, and Shadowrun had the same thing where you looked for the target number per die, right? And that many successes. But you, those are working with trying to mess with the same phenomena, but I think they also really wanted their outcomes to be very predictable. And so you end up with that diminished effect per exchange rolls. I should also point out that if you have, let's say you have a bell curve roll, and you roll it against a bell curve roll, and you have to compare the outcomes. The curve of the outcomes, which is really what you should be looking for, right? Never mind the individual bells, is actually now a sinusoidal, an S-shaped curve. And so therefore looking just at one roll is important. Are we looking against a target number? It's just completely easy on that side of the ledger. We're just looking for that number. Or are we looking for the interaction with some other set of things which are themselves probabilistic? And so therefore we have to remember what the ultimate curve really is. Does that help a little bit too? I mean, these are all things to take into account. We don't actually have to model this with graphs and get all geeky about it. We can say, I think all of us are good with the idea of, I'm going to roll my 5 dice, and I'm going to take the number of dice that are equal to or higher than 6 on D10s. I'm going to roll these, this number of D10s. I'm going to count the number of dice that are equal to or higher than 6.
Right.
And I'm going to do this over here. Now, that's it. Now I go and I just look at my table for effects. I need this many successes. Done. Or you have rolls working against you.